This company has arguably the strongest moat out of any company, and no one is going to take it away from them. I'm, of course, talking about ASML, but why does it have such a big moat? And is it really that significant? Well, first of all, we have to look at the company's valuation metrics. Now, ASML has a trailing 12-month price earnings ratio of 36.52 and a 5-year average price earnings ratio of 42.41, making ASML look pretty cheap compared to the 5-year average. Now, compared to the S&P 500 average price earnings ratio of 16, it makes ASML look very expensive, right? But in my opinion, we can pay a premium for ASML as it has such a wide moat, which I will get into details with later in the video. The trailing 12-month price to free cash flow ratio of ASML stands at 87.89, which is really high. So, why is this? Well, it is mainly because the business is going through an investment cycle, especially here in 2024, as the business has said in the previous quarters, which does impact the price to free cash flow ratio on a short term basis. Now, we shouldn't expect this to be permanent, as the company also mentioned that the heavy investments are going to pay off in the future, and even as early as 2025, partly due to the anticipation of continued demand for its EUV and other advanced lithography tools, which I will talk about later, as well as a reduction in backlogs that have accumulated over the past few years. So, this is nothing that I'm personally worried about. Next up is the return on investment capital, and here ASML really stands out with a trailing 12-month ROIC around 22%, which is really good, and it is definitely above the 9 to 10% return on investment capital we would like to see for the average company. But it is a bit lower than the 5-year average return on investment capital of 23.26%. But it could again have something to do with our current investment cycle, which I said I was not too worried about. What about the debt? Because if a company such as ASML have a lot of debt, it could damage their monopoly. But luckily, ASML has a cash flow to debt ratio of around 0 to 1, which just shows that ASML is not at risk with heavy debt levels. And that is another thing which we would like to see. One thing that ASML focuses on is returning cash back to shareholders through dividends and share buybacks, which I do really like, especially the part about share buybacks, as they have bought back around minus 8% of total shares in the past 5 years, which is really nice to see, showing that the management actually cares about the shareholders. So that is definitely a positive thing. Another thing that is very important when it comes to basically any company is the management having skin in the game, which means management owns plus 2% of the company, as when they have money or risk within the company that makes them want the company to do good. And for ASML, the management owns less than 1%, which is not that good. But we can also look at the CEO's net worth, which is $21.7 million, and his ASML position makes up $20.9 million of his total net worth. So we could expect the CEO to want the company to perform well, as it will also benefit him personally. So I'm not too worried about the management owning less than 1% of ASML, as the CEO has a big stake within the company. Next up is the growth potential. And personally, I see a lot of growth within this company. First of all, the semiconductor industry have been slowing down, especially within the automotive, mobile, and PC sector. But it is mainly because of the short-term reasons, such as high interest rates. Now, I do believe that the demand is going to recover in the long run, and this is just a bump on the road. One of the big growth factors for SML is especially their EUV lithography machines, which are basically machines that can make chips at smaller nodes, such as 5 nanometer and below, making them even more powerful. These chips power modern technologies like phones, AI processors, and advanced computing systems. The reason I personally see growth potential in these machines is that the demand for them is now higher than ever, driven by advancements in AI and 5G. Given that these machines are extremely expensive with a price tag of over 200 million US dollars, they also bring better margins compared to DUV machines, an older time of lithography system with around 4% higher profit margins. This could hugely benefit ASML in the long run, especially as demand for EUV technology is expected to grow at double-digit annual rate through the decade. This growth is largely driven by the increased complexity of chips and the need for more sophisticated manufacturing techniques to produce smaller and more powerful semiconductors, as I mentioned with AI and 5G. But how is ASML going to meet with this demand? Well, ASML plans to ramp up production of its UV systems, including high NA. By 2025 to 2026, the company aims to produce 90 UV machines annually, with plans for 20 high NA systems by 2027 to 2028. High NA systems are a special type of UV lithography machine made for even more precise chip making. They use a larger numeral aperture, which is NA for short, which works like a stronger magnifying glass to focus light more sharply. This better focus allows them to create much smaller features on chips than older machines, even at the angstrom scale, which is smaller than a nanometer. High NA systems help produce advanced chips for AI and faster computers, making production simpler and more efficient for modern technology. The importance of these high NA systems is to help continue Moore's law. This law states that the number of transistors on a chip doubles approximately every 2 years, making chips faster and more efficient. However, this has become increasingly difficult in recent years as there is a physical limit to how small chips can be made. And Smil hopes that the high NA systems will extend Moore's law for at least another decade. If successful, ASML stands to profit significantly, as these systems will make chips much faster and increase demand for high NA UV lithography machines. As we mentioned, ASML has a lot of growth potential. One thing that stands out is its strong competitive advantage, basically a monopoly. Competing with ASML isn't easy for a couple of reasons. First, these UV machines cost over $200 million each, so it takes a huge amount of money just to get started. Second, ASML has been leading the industry for a long time and knows exactly how to make the best machines. If you look at their competitors, they're way behind in terms of technology. ASML is already working at around 2 nanometers, while others are still at 7 to 10 nanometers and are hoping to reach 5 nanometers by 2025 to 2026. According to Moore's law, that puts ASML's rival at least 2.5 years behind in the best case scenario. And since it's been hard for ASML to keep up with Moore's law, it's going to be even tougher for others to catch up and shrink their nodes. Lastly, let's move on to the valuation. And this is where it becomes difficult to evaluate ASML because, as I mentioned, they are currently going through an investment cycle, which means their current free cash flow is at a low stage. So, evaluating ASML according to a DCF model would not give an accurate result. So, instead, I'm going to compare ASML with their current price earnings ratio and their 5 year average price earnings ratio, simply put it. And the 5 year average price earnings ratio sits at 41.6 and the trailing 12-month price earnings ratio is 36.52, making ASML look relatively cheap at the current price. Now, another valuation which we could look at is the Graham's valuation, which uses earnings per share, but I'm not that big of a fan of it, though it gives ASML an intrinsic value of 630 US dollars. And with a margin of safety at 20%, it makes the acceptable buy price at 504 US dollars, which makes ASML look expensive. In my opinion, I think ASML looks relatively cheap, and that's also why I have added a position at $667 per share or $667 per share, because it just seems like an overall great business with lots of growth potential in the future, though there is some risk to ASML, such as geopolitical concerns and also the recent drop in backlog from 38 to $36 billion, which is basically the total value of orders a company has received but hasn't yet completed or shipped. It represents future revenue. But this doesn't mean that money is lost. It just means that it will come in later. And it is mainly due to ASML's machines, especially UV systems, as they have long lead times for delivery, often ranging from 12 to 18 months. Now, these are some concerns, which, in my opinion, is not that big of a deal for the overall performance of the business and the long term growth. So, ASML is a buy for me. Thank you so much for watching, but if you want to learn more about monopoly businesses, watch this video right here where I analyze the second largest mode business.